Every empire in history has fallen, and what they all had in common was the same fatal moment, when they grew so complacent, so sure of their own strength that they believed they were too big to fail. In the end, they all did. Rome was the most powerful empire on earth for hundreds of years. But when debt soared, politics turned toxic, and the wealth gap exploded, the fall came fast. Today, America is the most powerful empire in the world. But just like before the fall of Rome, the dark clouds are gathering, and the warning signs are being ignored. Rome didn't start falling because some enemy army broke through its gates. It started when the people running the empire stopped doing their jobs. By the end, the Roman Senate was split into two camps that despised each other. They weren't just rivals, they saw the other side as a danger to Rome itself. One faction tried to fix the food supply, the other killed the plan out of spite. If there was trouble at the borders, they'd block funding for the army just to weaken the ruling party. Every crisis became a weapon in the fight for power. And while they battled each other, the empire's real problems went unsolved. That's exactly where America is now. Since Trump's first win in 2016, the political divide has turned into open warfare. Democrats say Trump is a corrupt authoritarian that will dismantle democracy to stay in power. Republicans say Democrats are destroying traditional values, pushing radical cultural agendas into schools and media, and flooding the country with illegal immigration. Neither side trusts the other to run the country. Neither side believes the other will play fair in an election. When both sides see the other as a mortal threat, compromise isn't just unlikely, it's impossible. In that kind of climate, nothing gets done to help the nation. Budgets stall, disaster relief is delayed, infrastructure crumbles. Just like Rome, America's leaders are so busy trying to destroy each other that they can't see the collapse they're helping to create. Then there's the military spending. Rome didn't just defend its own borders, it kept armies spread across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, often fighting small tribes or distant kingdoms that posed no real threat. Once Rome took a territory, it had to keep legions there forever. That meant endless supply lines, endless pay for soldiers, and endless risk of new uprisings. The longer they stayed out there, the more the treasury bled. Fast forward to America today and the pattern is repeating. The US spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined. Every conflict is sold to the public as liberation, spreading democracy, or fighting terrorism. They spent over $2 trillion in Afghanistan, another $800 billion in Iraq, fighting countries that could never have invaded America in the first place. And after all that, both ended up in the same condition, or worse, than when the US arrived. And when those wars ended, the spending didn't go down. It continued to rise. In fact, the proposed 2025 defense budget hits approximately $895 billion, about 4.1% increase over the 2023 levels. And this is in peacetime. There are over 750 US military bases in 80 countries, costing billions every year just to keep running. On top of that, billions more are now flowing to Ukraine and Israel. Meanwhile, bridges collapse, cities crumble, and veterans sleep on sidewalks. Just like Rome, America is bleeding resources into far-flung commitments, not because they make the country safer, but because once you build an empire, you can't stop feeding it. And that kind of military spending comes with another cost: debt. Rome didn't just bleed its treasury on endless wars, it also kept spending at home to keep the people happy. Free grain, public entertainment, massive building projects. The problem was the money wasn't there. To keep going, Rome started diluting its currency, which triggered inflation and made everything more expensive. It was the ancient version of living on borrowed money, and it couldn't last forever. In America's case, the addiction to spending beyond their means is just as bad. The national debt has exploded from around $23 trillion in 2020 to over $37 trillion today, the equivalent of every single citizen owing the government over $100,000. Both parties are guilty. In Trump's first term, record tax cuts combined with high spending blew the gap wide open. Under Biden, trillions more went into pandemic relief, new programs, and foreign aid. And now in Trump's second term, those tax cuts are set to continue while spending stays high, pushing the debt even further into dangerous territory. Some estimates say that as soon as 2030, the interest on the debt will be the single largest item on the federal budget, costing more than the military and Social Security combined. That's like the household spending more on credit card interest than on food, housing, or anything else, before even touching the balance. Eventually, the payments get so big you can't keep up and everything collapses. Unless America gets this under control, it's going to follow the same path as Rome. Runaway inflation that makes citizens poorer year after year, and eventually the collapse of the US dollar itself. It's a ticking time bomb that nobody in Washington wants to defuse. In Rome, the system was rigged for the rich. Senators and generals swallowed up farmland, dodged taxes, and grew their estates, while the small farmers and tradesmen who once kept the empire stable were driven into poverty. The middle class vanished, and the gap between rich and poor became unbridgeable. Today in America, the pattern repeats. The top 50% of Americans now control 97.5% of all wealth in the country. The other half, 170 million people, share just 2.5%. And it's even worse at the top. The richest 10% alone hold about 67% of all wealth. Government policy doesn't just allow this, it rewards it. Capital gains and investment income, which overwhelmingly benefit the wealthy, are taxed at lower rates than ordinary wages. Corporate loopholes let giant companies pay little or nothing in federal taxes, even in years of record profit. And when disaster strikes, the 2008 crash, the pandemic, it's the big banks and corporations that get rescued first, while everyday Americans wait in unemployment lines. Result? A hollowed-out middle class, crushed by rising costs and stagnant wages, while billionaires stack up more wealth than entire states. And Trump's recent tax cuts are said to make it worse. Structured to heavily benefit the wealthy and large corporations, they're a payback to the same donor class that helped put him back in office. In Rome, the elite rewrote the rules to keep themselves on top while the base of the empire rotted away. In America, the pattern is repeating, feeding the top while bleeding out the foundation that keeps the whole thing standing. In Rome's final years, the needs of ordinary citizens came last. The treasury was drained on wars and elite luxuries. Grain shortages left people hungry, infrastructure crumbled, law and order broke down. And as public trust vanished, many turned to local strongmen or mercenaries for protection. When an empire can't care for its own people, its fall becomes inevitable. In America, the same neglect is now playing out in real time. Homelessness is at record highs. 10 cities stretch across downtown areas from Los Angeles to Philadelphia. Crime has spiked in major cities. The cost of living has exploded, leaving millions struggling to afford housing, healthcare, and groceries. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans now live paycheck to paycheck, one missed payday away from disaster. And in 2025, Trump's second term has made the government's priorities crystal clear. He has pushed for cuts to Social Security and Medicaid in the name of fiscal discipline, even as defense spending continues to climb and billions in military aid flows overseas, including more than $5 billion a year to Israel's armed forces and missile defense systems, directly subsidizing its current military campaigns. Danger is that Social Security's trust fund is already projected to run dry by 2033, at which point benefits would automatically drop by 23% unless something changes. Medicare's main trust fund is expected to follow by 2036. Under current policy, those deadlines will arrive even faster, with the country's massive budget crisis making full benefits impossible to sustain. Meanwhile, the federal budget still finds room for foreign military aid, corporate subsidies, and tax breaks for the wealthy donor class. Just like Rome, the empire's resources are being diverted away from the people who actually hold it up. The government ignores the basic needs of its own citizens while feeding the ambitions of the elite and the machinery of empire. Collapse is not a possibility, it's a certainty. Rome learned it the hard way, and America is next. The final fatal flaw of every empire is arrogance. At their peak, they believe they are untouchable, too powerful, too advanced, too entrenched to ever fall. Rome thought the same. For centuries it ruled the known world. Even as its economy faltered, its politics fractured, and its people slipped into poverty, the elite convinced themselves the empire would last forever. But the decline didn't happen overnight. It was a slow bleed. 2 centuries of internal decay that everyone thought they could manage. In the last 100 years, Rome's armies were stretched so far across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East that they could no longer defend their own borders. Financial crises deepened. When the final invasions came, the empire didn't crumble slowly, it was overrun. America's fate will look different. No foreign army will storm its shores. Its mainland is shielded by oceans and nuclear deterrents. The fall will come from within, when the country can no longer afford to bankroll its global footprint. When the debt, the wars, and the foreign aid drain so much from the treasury that expansion stalls, alliances weaken, and the empire turns inward in retreat. With debt already at record highs, America can't afford a full-scale conflict with another major power. And when that reality sets in, the illusion of dominance will vanish. Every empire believes it's the exception, that the rules of history don't apply to them. That's why the warning signs are always ignored, and why the same mistakes are repeated again and again. The only question now is whether America will recognize the pattern in time, or like Rome, wake up too late. If you found this video insightful, you might like another one on a similar topic. Click on the thumbnail to watch or keep exploring. Also, please comment, like, and subscribe to the channel.